Horizon Forbidden West is the long-awaited sequel to the 2017 former PlayStation exclusive Horizon Zero Dawn. Now, I loved Zero Dawn. It was a traditional open-world adventure, but its post-apocalyptic setting was very unique, and in my opinion the game's strongest aspect. I found the mystery behind the world to be utterly fascinating. Never before have I played a game where I was so willing to find collectibles and read data points just to learn more about it. It was incredibly captivating to me. The game's story was all about discovering how this world came to be. It was a slow, methodical gathering of information that, piece by piece, spurred the player to delve deeper into its secrecy. The narrative contained some mind-blowing bombshells peppered throughout, ultimately resulting in one of the most memorable and original stories I have ever seen in a video game. Gameplay was fun, there were lots of stealth elements, and fighting the vast array of machines was entertaining. Other parts of the game felt relatively weaker though. Personally, I found the side quests to be okay. There were no characters outside of Aloy and Silence that I thought were compelling enough, and anyone who's played the game knows that the melee combat was so underwhelming, it may as well have been non-existent. Forbidden West takes everything established in the first game and expands upon it with mixed results. There is, in my opinion, a story that is nowhere near as memorable as Zero Dawn's, a host of issues with combat against machines, melee combat that is still lackluster, and some very bizarre design choices. But at the same time, there's a bunch of added features that allow for greater creativity in its content, and this is where the game shines brightest to me. There are certain elements that I absolutely adored, but there are also some things I think it gets wrong, especially following on from the first game. I am so conflicted with this title. Part of me loves it, but the other part of me cannot help but feel disappointed by it. Ultimately, if you enjoyed Zero Dawn, then it is likely you will enjoy the majority of Forbidden West, as fundamentally they are the same game. This one is a lot more adventurous than its predecessor, and you may very well relish in its flashier presentation. Now, I was concerned when this game was first announced. I thought it would be very difficult to create a sequel with a narrative that lived up to Zero Dawn's. After finishing the game, I can say that Forbidden West's story is different, and not necessarily in a good way. I don't know how fans of the first game are going to take this, so let's talk about it. With that in mind, be warned that there will be some slight spoilers in this video. Nothing too crazy, but I thought I'd give a warning anyway. Forbidden West takes place shortly after the events of Zero Dawn. Aloy is desperately seeking a backup of Gaia, Zero Dawn's governing AI, which if you recall from the first game self-destructed in an attempt to destroy Hades, which had gone rogue thanks to a mysterious signal. Without Gaia, all life on Earth will eventually cease to exist as the terraforming system gets more and more out of control. Soon enough, Aloy discovers a message left by Silence. Apparently he has stolen Hades and extracted information from it on the mysterious signal and where to obtain an actual backup of Gaia. He tells her to find him in the Forbidden West, so she can learn everything he has discovered. Before leaving, she is warned that the West is ruled by a deadly tribe of warriors known as the Tenakth, who are at war with the Karja, but are currently in a state of fragile peace with them. In time, Aloy finds a backup of Gaia, but it lacks the subordinate functions, and without them, it's pretty much useless. From this point, Aloy makes it her goal to track down 3 of the sub-functions and combine them with the Gaia root kernel. So with a premise like this, Forbidden West becomes a bit more traditional than Zero Dawn. You reach a new area, solve the puzzles, kill the enemies, and retrieve the subordinate function. Standard video game stuff, at least for this part anyway. There is some decent variety in what you do here. Along the way you meet up with a few clans of the Tenakth tribe and learn of their customs. You swim through the ruins of Las Vegas in a really awesome section, and you encounter a tribe from across the sea possessing early model focuses. Las Vegas isn't the only place you travel to, you also venture into California and San Francisco, and all of these areas are engaging backdrops. This takes up a large chunk of the main narrative, but the story also features some crazy high sci-fi stuff that involves a second clone of Elizabeth Sobeck, interstellar travel, and shit that would not be out of place in Star Trek or the X-Men. This is where I'm left very conflicted with this story. I think this game goes too far off the deep end. I mean, make no mistake, the first game was definitely sci-fi, but at least there was some sense of believability about it. This feels like a bit too much. Forbidden West is undoubtedly bigger, flashier, and more epic, but to me a lot of what made the first game's story so memorable is lacking here. There is a lingering sense of mystery clouding the entire journey, but the reveals feel pretty minor, lacking the same level of satisfaction when you finally understand them. In a way, I found myself enjoying the lead up to the reveals more than the actual reveals themselves, and that is a step down from Zero Dawn, where I heavily enjoyed both. I feel like it tries to adhere to the mystery of the first game, while simultaneously offering a more adventurous narrative. It succeeds in both of those aspects, especially the latter, but the former isn't quite as fulfilling for me. Certain characters feel very underutilized as well, the biggest one being Silence. I really wish he got more screen time here. He's largely absent for the vast majority of the story, and I think that's a real shame because he is by far the most interesting character to me. You only get to converse with him in the first few sections, and then the final section, and that sucks. This is a different kind of story. If you're a fan of sci-fi, you'll probably enjoy what you get here, but I have no idea how fans of the first game will react to it. There are some very strong aspects to Forbidden West narrative. Possibly the strongest is how it places a large focus on your companions. Aloy gathers allies after completing most of the major sections, some new faces and some familiar ones, and I found almost all of them to be rather compelling. These companions also offer the best side quests in the game as they're given focus and are more fleshed out than the people you find in the wilds. They all have so much to say about everything, and there are plenty of great character moments. Where I feel the writing shines the most is when characters are conversing with each other. There's a lot of nuance in certain conversations, which is supported by excellent voice acting. Considering the far greater number of characters in this game compared to the first, I think they did a really good job with the performances and the dialogue. This is a very chatty game, with some conversations lasting more than 25 minutes if you select every dialogue option, but I found the vast majority of them to be worth listening in on. There's a lot of callbacks to the first game as well, and sections that expand on characters in intriguing ways. It should go without saying that you will get the most out of this game if you've played the first one. There are also some epic moments, but rather than being knowledge reveals, they mainly stem from flashy action sequences, and some of them are great. I would show a few of them off, but that would be treading too far into spoiler territory. Like previously, there are loads of interesting data points and recordings from the old world, some of which are legitimately fascinating. I do appreciate how much effort has been placed into this. I imagine the overall reception to Forbidden West narrative will be a bit more mixed than what Zero Dawn received. There are elements of Forbidden West story that are absolutely superior to the first game, but likewise there are elements that are weaker. I think it lacks some of the magic that made the first game so memorable, but it tries to make up for that and shines in other ways. The ending has set it up for a sequel. In fact, the ending is basically a sequel bait. There is no doubt a third game is on its way, as opposed to last time where it wasn't quite as clear-cut. I guess all I can say is that you should strap yourself in for this one because it's pretty wild. Whether that's a good thing or not is ultimately up for you to decide. Forbidden West is essentially a bigger version of Zero Dawn. The foundations are exactly the same, so if you are hoping for something radically different, you won't find it here, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, as Forbidden West offers exciting new features that propel some of the gameplay to far greater heights. That is, once you actually get there. Just like its predecessor, this game's opening is slow. You can spend upwards of 10 hours hanging around the first settlement, Barren Light, before the gates finally open, allowing you to cross into the new zone, and once you do, the game becomes far more enjoyable. The Forbidden West is a massive, sprawling landscape, and impressively, there's something to see and do at almost every turn. The world map is positively littered with machine sites, campfires, minor settlements, major settlements, old world ruins, and much, much more. Every time you set off on foot, you're almost guaranteed to find something, and that makes exploration rewarding. In the settings menu, you can choose to complete quests and explore the world with minimal guidance rather than receiving detailed markers on screen every step of the way, and this is pretty cool. It doesn't leave you completely blind. You'll be sent to a general location, but once you're there, it's up to you to figure things out. With Aloy's focus, nothing is ever too cryptic, and just like Zero Dawn, using it is key to everything in this game. There are some locations where you need a specific upgrade in order to access it, and you receive these upgrades by playing through the main quest, giving you something to look forward to and remember if you eventually head back there. There are more methods of traversal this time. You immediately have access to your charger mount as well as the ability to override them out in the wilds, and there are campfires everywhere making fast travel swift and convenient. Unfortunately, the control when mounting machines is far too clunky. It is a bitch to maneuver them, and they often come to a standstill when changing terrain or traveling anywhere that isn't a flat surface. It's so bad that I actively avoided mounting machines whenever I could. But anyway, the game also gives you a glider very early on. Nintendo really nailed this feature in Breath of the Wild, and it's not surprising to see so many open world games make their own version of it. It lets you travel much greater distances on the go, and completely removes the fear of falling from a large height, a welcome addition. There's also another method of transportation you receive late into the main story, and it's absolutely incredible. One of my favorite things about Forbidden West. I won't spoil it here, but trust me, it's amazing. Free climbing makes a return, and it's more accessible now. Markings still exist all over the world, but there are also times when scalable mountains and the like won't have markings. Instead, you have to use your focus to scan a cliff face or wall, and the yellow indicators will tell you if you can climb there. This opens up greater possibilities. However, it does make instances where you can't climb up specific areas feel a bit bizarre. Sometimes there's only one path to take when climbing, so what could have been greatly organic sections are instead rather scripted, and I think that's a shame. Still, I do get a kick out of the free climbing here, and it's made even better now thanks to one of Aloy's new tools, the pullcaster, which is effectively a grappling hook, allowing her to reach higher areas at a faster rate. You also have the ability to swim underwater now, and initially I found this rather unintuitive. If underwater swimming is not handled properly in a video game, it can be an absolute nightmare, but thankfully, after a bit of practice, I was able to adjust myself accordingly, and I actually think the controls are pretty good. You'll become comfortable with it once you reach the Las Vegas portion of the story. Aloy creates a device that allows her to breathe underwater, and it ends up being a lot of fun. I still think there's a slight degree of awkwardness to the underwater swimming, but it's more than manageable. All these methods of traversal combined allow for greater creativity, and the game's content itself is more creative as well. Overriding tallnecks, for example, are no longer just simple climbing exercises. There's one in a cauldron you have to fix, one stuck underwater you have to gather parts for, and a couple that seem out of reach initially. I remember coming across this one out in the wilds, and there's a structure nearby you're meant to climb to access it, but I just so happened to be on top of a mountain, so I glided straight on top of it. That's a sense of freedom I rarely got in the previous game, and it feels great. Forbidden West does an amazing job of utilizing all of Aloy's new upgrades to create much more distinct gameplay sections. The absolute highlight of this for me is Cauldron Kappa. Cauldrons were some of my favorite areas from Zero Dawn. The contrast between these deeply artificial and mechanical facilities against the stunning natural beauty of the open world is something I found really captivating. I already mentioned the one where you have to fix up a tallneck, but Cauldron Kappa is submerged underwater, and it may just be my favorite in the entire series. Underwater dungeons leave me a bit hesitant to approach, but I think Guerrilla Games really nailed the puzzle solving and exploration aspect of this one. There's something about seeing these massive mechanical facilities underwater that is legitimately daunting, more so than any other cauldron so far. It's quite something. As tradition would have it, most cauldrons end with a fight against a big-ass machine. For this game, that means taking on an Apex variant, basically a much bigger and more powerful version of that machine, and let's just say that these guys do not fuck around. Now, combat was one of Zero Dawn's strongest aspects, thanks to the different weapons at your disposal and the freedom you had in approaching encounters. Forbidden West feels a lot more rigid in how you can deal with enemies, limiting creativity and punishing the use of incorrect weapon types. Just like previously, against machines, you have to use your focus to scan them, registering their information and identifying their weaknesses. For a short time their weak points will be highlighted, and these are the areas you must target, as aiming anywhere else will barely tickle them. You can shoot specific parts like canisters to have them explode and deal massive damage. You can even disable their weaponry by shooting their cannons right off and then picking them up and using them for yourself. It's very satisfying to do so, if you're not being trampled on in the process. Because of this, it is imperative that you scan every enemy before engaging in battle, but the real key to taking down machines is using the correct elemental type against them. Every machine is vulnerable to a certain type of element, and using elemental ammo repeatedly will impose a status effect on them with differing results depending on which one you use. Fire applies a burning effect, shock causes temporary paralysis, acid weakens armor and deals damage over time, etc, etc. Combining these effects with the targeting of weak points is the most effective way to deal a lot of damage. If you played Zero Dawn, you should be familiar with this concept, but even so, and similar to that game, I don't think Forbidden West puts enough emphasis on how important this is. At some point in your adventure, you may need to stop at a merchant and purchase weapons with a bunch of different elemental ammunition types, because without them, especially against the stronger machines, fights can really drag. You just don't deal enough damage. This is one of the biggest things about Forbidden West combat that I dislike compared to Zero Dawn's. You are punished much more for not using the correct elemental type. Scanning and shooting weak points feels secondary in comparison here, so now the game is forcing me to do things in a certain manner, limiting my options and freedom, which is far less rewarding. The game clearly wants me to approach things in a specific way, and that's confirmed by your allies constantly throwing elemental ammunition types at you, as if they're reminding you why the enemy is still alive. But you can only craft these ammunition types with the correct resources. The crafting works exactly the same as before, you just open your weapon wheel and craft the appropriate ammo. Time slows down for a bit, so it's not too intrusive. As a quick side note, I wish Forbidden West took a page out of Ghost of Tsushima and made collecting resources seamless, and by that I mean foregoing the animation. When searching the corpses of machines and humans as well as opening treasure chests and the like, it's fine, but having to manually pick up every single piece of wood or berry or whatever starts to drag after a while. It's a constant pace breaker. But anyway, the machines are extremely aggressive here, much more so than Zero Dawn, and I honestly think this does the game more harm than good. They won't hesitate to gang up on you, and they all have various methods to dish out the pain. Expect to see close quarters fighters, ranged fighters, explosives, laser beams, turrets. Some are small and nimble, others are gigantic. There are flying machines, stealth machines, and every single one has a combination of these features. I will say that there is amazing variety in the machine types, and they each offer a slightly different experience. There are almost double the amount of machines from Zero Dawn, and the new additions are awesome. However, a lot of their attacks seem to have this weird auto-tracking thing going on, which feels unnatural. There were also times when Aloy's hitbox felt a bit off, leaving me unfairly disadvantaged. Now this is a massive issue in fights against multiple machines, because you can get stun-locked in this game, and it sure as shit ain't a fun time when it happens. Aloy has a lengthy delay on her recovery after dodging 3 times, and when using certain weapons like the bolt blasters, her dodging animation is even worse, so it's very easy to get combo juggled by enemies. You'll feel this the most when you're fighting in a confined area, and Jesus Christ, this is where the quality of the combat declines so quickly. If you can't put enough distance between yourself and the machine, fighting them can feel like clusterfucks of the highest magnitude. It's something I noticed in Cauldrons and especially the arena, more than anywhere else. Fights get way too chaotic here. This is especially bad with machines that jump at you. I absolutely despise leap lashers, a new type of machine based on kangaroos, so of course they're jumping all over the place. There were many times where I felt suffocated in combat, with no hope of regaining my footing or counterattacking, and it's so disheartening whenever it happens. This was a problem in Zero Dawn, but I found it much worse in this game, and that's a direct result of the machine's overly aggressive nature. Fighting in a confined area can be really frustrating, and the improved melee combat doesn't do enough to alleviate that. You can enhance all of Aloy's abilities via the skill tree, and there's way more to choose from now. In Zero Dawn, you had a total of 44 unlockable skills. In Forbidden West, there are over 160, with different types of skills as well. It is extremely easy to accumulate skill points in this game, so spend them as you see fit. Naturally, each skill tree focuses on a different area, whether it be traps, ranged combat, Aloy's ability to heal and gather materials, stealth, or overriding machines. Perhaps the most interesting one is the Warrior skill tree, which enhances Aloy's melee combat. It's clear that Guerrilla Games have put some effort into making close quarters fighting viable, and the end result is not great. Through the Warrior skill tree, you can unlock a bunch of different combos for Aloy's melee game, and some of them are good. My personal favorites are the ones that have you combine your bow and arrow with your spear strikes to deal big damage. They are fun to pull off. However, there is some highly questionable movement in the melee combat. As I said before, the game has a sort of auto-locking thing going on, and I guess to compensate for that, sometimes Aloy will travel huge distances when swinging her spear, especially if she uses the charged melee attack. This can work to your advantage, but it also extends to your enemies. Sometimes human opponents have wildly large swings to their attacks that defy physics. It's a bit inconsistent in its frequency, so whenever it catches you off guard, it feels cheap. Then there are times when human enemies can break your guard and counterattack you, even if you're striking them from behind. Beyond that, the melee combat is only really viable against human enemies and small machines. If you're fighting multiple machines and against the bigger ones, you're gonna want to stick to your ranged weapons as they are far more effective. Okay, that makes sense, and I appreciate having more options, but melee strikes don't deal a lot of damage until you max out the warrior tree, and even then, shooting the weak spots of machines, using elemental ammunition, going for headshots with your bow and arrow, or using stealth are all much more effective options. Being forced to spec into the warrior tree just to have half-decent close quarters capabilities doesn't feel good either. All in all, the melee combat is still rather underwhelming. It is better than Zero Dawn, although that is not saying much, but it feels far inferior to using your ranged weapons, and the janky movement certainly doesn't help things. I always prefer taking a more subtle approach when I can, and Forbidden West does reward the player for using stealth. It is super satisfying to methodically work your way around an area, picking enemies off one by one. The silent strike is most effective here, and you can tell if it will kill an enemy thanks to the skull icon next to the prompt, which I appreciate. I do think the game is not really flexible enough in your positioning for stealth takedowns, leading me to accidentally whack an enemy from behind, destroying any hope of taking them out silently, which happened more often than I was comfortable with. If you want to kill enemies with headshots early on, you need the sharp shot bow, which again the game doesn't go out of its way to tell you about, but once you get it, it does feel good taking out enemies from afar. I haven't even mentioned stuff like the new weapon techniques, which augment a weapon's capabilities, stuff like the triple notch, allowing Aloy to fire 3 arrows of your currently selected type. Another new addition comes in the form of Valor Surges, giving Aloy a powerful boost to her abilities. There's one to improve her melee damage, increase her critical hit chance, one that acts as a cloaking device, and more. Both the weapon techniques and the Valor Surges require their own resource to use. You can also override machines and fight on the back of them now, but their damage output is pathetic. Maybe I need more points in the Machine Master tree. One more thing I want to say is that I think the setup for potions is handled really poorly. Until you upgrade your pouch, you can only carry 3 potions total of any type at a time. So you could have 2 useless stamina potions and a cleanse potion on you when you desperately need a healing potion, but if you find one in a treasure chest, it will be sent back to your stash. Why are potions limited to a total number collectively instead of a total number for each individual potion? That feels like a needless limitation. There's already an animation whenever you drink one, so you can't just chug potions willy-nilly in the heat of battle, so why am I being further limited? It is incredibly easy to burn through your berries with all the issues I mentioned prior to this, so having this scuffed potion setup doesn't do the game any favors. I gotta say that overall, I'm disappointed with combat here. I do enjoy the vast array of weapons, the differing terrain that can potentially lead to unique encounters, using environmental hazards to turn the tide in my favor, and all the new machines. I'm really fond of Slaughter Spines, Dreadfangs, and especially the Slitherfangs. They are incredible design-wise, but I don't think the rest of the game compensates for how ridiculously aggressive they are. Things get way too chaotic in the heat of battle at times, especially when you're pitted against multiple machines or you're fighting in a tight area. On top of that, the heavy reliance on elemental ammunition to deal any sort of damage stifles creativity and strategic options. The melee combat is not good enough, there's too much jank in the movement, getting stun locked over and over is not a fun time. I feel this game has a lot of issues with its combat system. It definitely feels like a step down from Zero Dawn for me. It's not as fun, not as satisfying, and much more frustrating. Outside of combat, the game is about the same as before. Hunting grounds have made a return, offering unique challenges, and I enjoyed all of them, although they felt much easier than the ones in Zero Dawn. In an attempt to make up for that though, Forbidden West introduces the arena. Unlike the hunting grounds where you had to complete challenges with specific stipulations, the arena consists of death matches against various Apex machines. You have to clear out all the machines within a time frame to achieve medals, which you then trade for gear. This is a concept that sounds like a good idea in theory, but in practice, I think it's mired with issues. As soon as you enter the arena, the machines are immediately made aware of your presence. From here, the fights get way too messy, reduced to close quarters mayhem. You're fighting in a very limited space, which brings all the problems I mentioned earlier into full view. On top of that, there is no opportunity for stealth, or placing traps beforehand, or any sort of creativity, which is what makes combat in this series so fun to me. Constantly getting bum-rushed by machines from every angle going is not a fun time. I get that these are challenges, but when combat is reduced to a battle of attrition, especially within a time frame, its quality declines very quickly. There's also a shard fee whenever you want to attempt them, including already cleared ones, and you'd be surprised how quickly this starts to add up. Anyway, you can test your melee capabilities by battling pitmasters, and their challenges act as tutorials for the melee combat. Some of them are a bit wishy-washy, with instructions that are straight up misleading. You have to perform different combo moves in succession, but the inputs for the combos are displayed individually instead of combined together. If you follow these instructions as they are shown on screen, you will fail the challenge, and that is ridiculous. Personally, I found the side quest to be pretty average. There are some decent individual tales out in the wilds, but you're not given enough time with these characters for them to be truly memorable, and as such these side quests feel like standard open world affairs. As I said before, the best side quests come from Aloy's companions, but even they tend to fall under similar trappings. Every single side quest is set up as such. You talk to a quest giver, go to a specific area, and it always ends with a battle against a big-ass machine or multiple machines and human enemies. The circumstances are always different, but there's no real variety in what you do. Instead, the variety comes from the different types of machines you fight, and I couldn't help but notice how repetitive they felt after a while. Still, again, the companion side quests are great, my personal favorite being Kotallo's. I will commend the attention to detail as well. Every NPC will comment on your deeds depending on what you've done in the story and for other people, and that is pretty cool. It makes the world feel very alive. Other than that, it's the standard busy work. You can locate all the collectibles, participate in races on the back of machines, which I think are very unenjoyable personally, considering how clunky mounted movement is, or play Machine Strike, a chess-like tabletop game. I don't think it has anything on Gwent, since, you know, that's the go-to minigame to compare minigames to, but it's not too bad. In terms of graphics and presentation, Forbidden West rocks one of the sharpest pictures I have ever seen in a video game. Trust me when I say that any footage of this game you find on the internet will not do it justice. I recorded this game directly off the PS5, and even that raw footage, before I've compressed it and uploaded it for this video, doesn't do it justice. This game is absolutely gorgeous. I've always been a fan of Horizon's art style. It brings out the natural beauty of the world wonderfully. The textures, the lighting, the environments, particle effects, everything has seen a tremendous boost in quality. There is so much detail on Aloy's face, like the droplets from the rain. It's very impressive. The water physics are incredible. I could stare at the ocean all day long, and I also love the day-night cycle. It's very easy on the eyes. The character models look much better than they did in Zero Dawn. They actually resemble regular people now, with better facial animations and body movements as well. Now, I did notice several instances of graphical pop-up and some rendering issues. I played this game on performance mode because resolution mode locks you at 30 FPS, and I'm not a fan of that. For the vast majority of the adventure, it was a clean 60 frames per second, with only a couple moments where there was a noticeable dip. Another thing I noticed is that sometimes characters' eyes move all over the place. They don't always focus on the person they're talking to. Naturally, given that Aloy is the main character, I noticed it with her more than anyone else, and it's extremely distracting. It's at its worst during side quests. The main quests are fine, and it's not that big an issue or anything. I just feel a bit more care should have been taken here. Thankfully, an area where a lot of care was taken is the soundtrack, and Forbidden West's OST is brilliant. A healthy mixture of songs and pieces make for a score that is far better than what Zero Dawn offered. I absolutely love this song In the Flood, the one that plays during the opening credits. They really put a lot of focus on the violin, and it fits so well for this game, but there are also some great synthetic pieces that remind me of Deus Ex, and I'm always down for that. Guerrilla Games went above and beyond for this soundtrack, and it really is superb. I guess the last thing to talk about are the bugs. I've seen some interesting ones posted on the internet, but I did not encounter many. The only thing that comes to mind is in some fights against flying machines, they would just hover about without actually attacking me. There were also times when the audio seemed to bug out, going silent at moments. I'm not really sure what that's about, but otherwise it was mainly just visual stuff like I mentioned earlier, so I don't have much to report in this regard. I hate to say this, but Forbidden West is a disappointing sequel for me. I'm so conflicted because I do think some aspects of it are genuinely excellent. Its biggest strength is how it builds and expands upon gameplay elements established in the first game, leading to much more creative content that is loads of fun to play. I loved overriding tallnecks more than ever this time, exploring cauldrons once more, all the new methods of traversal besides mounting machines, and being blown away by the game's production values. It's clear that a lot of effort has gone into making the game more detailed, adventurous, spectacular, and that is impressive. But then there's shit like the arena, which I think is so poorly implemented. The side quests are average, the melee combat is still not very good, the combat against machines is plagued by issues, and the biggest thing is that the main story is nowhere near as memorable as Zero Dawn's to me. I don't feel the same magic as before, and that leaves me disappointed. I want to say that I can still recommend this game, because Forbidden West is not terrible by any stretch of the imagination. I had to voice my own personal misgivings towards it, and I stand by them. But the game is great in a lot of ways. There are just some things I think are a step down from its predecessor. To reiterate what I said in the intro, if you enjoyed Zero Dawn, then it is likely you will enjoy the majority of Forbidden West. Hell, you may enjoy everything about the game. This is just my opinion at the end of the day, so if you're a fan of open world adventures, and especially if you played the first game, I do think this one is worth picking up. Thanks for watching.